It seems like every 10 or 15 years, a new piece of technology just lands and completely changes the game. Think about it. The PC, the internet, the smartphone, each one totally reshaped our world. Well, right now, we are standing at the very beginning of the next big one. And this timeline, man, it really shows you the scale we're talking about. This isn't just some clever new app or a cool product. Generative AI is a fundamental platform shift. It's as massive as the jump from giant mainframe computers to a PC on every desk, or from firing up your web browser to having the internet in your pocket. This is the new ground floor that pretty much everything else is about to be built on top of. So that leads us to the big question, right? The one we're going to try and unpack here. Who is actually affected by all this, and just how deep are these changes going to go? We're going to tackle this from two different angles. First, what's happening on the inside in the world of big tech, and then how all of that is spilling out and affecting every single one of us. Okay, so let's start with the inside story. Because to understand what's happening right now, you have to understand that the entire tech industry is being driven by one single, incredibly powerful feeling, a massive trillion-dollar fear of missing out. You know it as FOMO. This quote from Google's CEO, Sundar Pichai, it just nails the mentality perfectly. It's a high-stakes poker game. The conversation isn't about, wow, this is expensive. The real fear, the one that keeps them up at night, is the existential dread of not spending enough, of getting left behind, like Microsoft famously did in the early days of mobile. And you can see that fear right here on this chart. I mean, just look at that vertical climb. This is not a gentle, gradual increase in spending. No, this is an all-out arms race. We're talking about capital expenditure, the money they spend on hard physical stuff like data centers and chips, and it is just skyrocketing as every major company is desperately scrambling to claim their territory. And the numbers themselves are just staggering. For 2025 alone, we're on track for the big four tech giants to spend around $400 billion. Let me put that into perspective for you. That's more than the entire global telecom industry spends in a whole year. Just wow. But here's the thing. This race isn't just about who can write the biggest check. We're actually starting to slam into hard physical limits. There literally aren't enough of the high-end chips from NVIDIA to go around. There's not enough electricity on the grid to power all these new data centers. And we can't even build the data centers fast enough. This gold rush is hitting a massive supply chain problem. So with all that chaos and all that spending happening inside tech, how does it actually make its way into the real world? How does all this tech move from a line of code in some massive data center to a tool that you or your business or your school can actually get your hands on and use? Well, it turns out there's a pretty predictable pattern for how we all adopt these huge new platforms. It happens in 3 stages. First, we absorb it. We just use it for the simple, obvious stuff, automating tasks we already do. Then we start to innovate. We build completely new products and services that just weren't possible before. And finally, that leads to disruption, where the tech is so ingrained it forces us to completely rethink the fundamental questions we're even asking in the first place. In this chart here, it shows you exactly where most of the world is right now. You see all that blue? Despite the hype, despite all the money, the vast majority of organizations are still just dipping their toes in the water. They're in the pilot or experiment phase. They are firmly in stage 1, absorb. And that's totally normal for a shift this huge. So what is it that they're absorbing? To really get your head around it, this is the single best metaphor I've come across. At its heart, generative AI gives any person, any company, any classroom, access to a team of infinite interns. Think about it. They are incredibly fast, they know a ton of stuff, and they can handle a massive amount of work. But, and this is key, they aren't experts. And this leads to this really fascinating economic twist called the Jevons paradox. So the old assumption with any automation is, great, we can do the same amount of work but with fewer people. But that's not what happens. History shows us the exact opposite is true. The classic example is email. It made sending a message practically free. So did we send fewer letters? No. The total amount of communication absolutely exploded. When a resource becomes cheap and easy, our consumption of it goes through the roof. We don't just do the same work more efficiently, we invent entirely new types of work to do. So this idea of infinite interns and this explosion of new capacity, it forces us to ask some really deep, really important questions. And for anyone in education, this is where it gets really challenging. I mean, how do you prepare students for a future where their competition and their collaborator is a workforce of infinite interns? Because here's the catch, and it's a big one. These interns, they're not perfect. They make stuff up. They hallucinate. And this doesn't seem to be a bug that's going to get fixed anytime soon. It looks like a fundamental feature of how the technology works. So the question becomes, how do we use a tool and how do we teach our kids to use a tool that can be brilliantly creative one moment and confidently totally wrong the next? This puts the human in the loop right at the center of everything. And if you're an educator, this is the new frontier. What are the new skills we have to teach? It's not just about learning how to write a good prompt. It's about critical thinking on steroids. It's about teaching the ability to evaluate what the AI gives you, to verify its claims, and to have the judgment to know when a tiny error doesn't matter at all versus when it's an absolute disaster. These are the skills that are going to define success. Now let's zoom out even further. If one person, armed with their team of infinite AI interns, can now do what used to take a giant company with thousands of employees, what does that change? Well, for one, old business models that relied on huge armies of people might just fall apart. But on the flip side, it means that new ideas, new scientific research, new creative projects that were once impossibly expensive are now suddenly within reach for everyone. And that leaves us with this final, really profound thought. For decades, we have been drowning in infinite choice: what to buy, what to watch, what to read. Now, for the very first time, we have a machine that can see all of that information, and it can see us and our place in it. The question is no longer just, what are my options? But, what should I do? And what happens to us and to our world when the machine starts to answer?